hop on a plane from Honolulu to Fort Myers, Florida, knock on his door one morning, walk in there, and walk out an hour later with a signed confession from him. And he ended up going to prison and then getting sent back to Madagascar.
You make it sound kind of easy.
Well, I mean, it took about a year total. But yeah.
The way you word it, just went and knocked on his door, got a confession.
Well, again, keep in mind, by this point, I had been an agent for
Yep.
damn near 15, 16 years.
So it was getting easier for
working
you.
a lot of cases that involved me conducting interrogations and getting people to confess to me and tell me the truth, even though it was against their legal self-interest. And so I got really good at that. Then I go to a CIA interrogation school. Then I start teaching other FBI agents and other FBI intelligence officers how to conduct interrogations. And so it became sort of a pet project of mine, and people started bringing me in on their cases to conduct the interrogation to get that confession. And so it's real passion of mine.
I'm kind of intrigued, since you're an expert of interrogation, how do you tell when someone's lying?
Man, when I was a new agent back in 95, they had all sorts of things like if the guy looks up and to his left, it means he's looking at his brain for an answer and he's lying. All that stuff has been debunked, right? The best thing you could do is know the case inside and out and all the facts of the case before you sit down with the bad guy. So that's the first thing. But let's say you don't have that luxury. There's behavioral science tricks that you can look for. For instance, I would like to begin the conversation by just talking to you and finding out what you're like as a person. And then once I begin getting to the actual subject matter that I want to know about, I'm looking for changes in your behavior that might be indicative of a lie, right? Like, so the idea that you're crossing your arms, that means you're lying. Maybe you're just a guy who crosses his arms. But if I'm talking to you and you have a very open physical stance and you're speaking in the past tense about things that have happened and you're saying all the right things, then I start asking you about tough stuff, and then you stop making eye contact. Maybe you start looking down. Maybe your arms cross. Maybe you start telling stories about things that happened in the past, but using the present tense, which tells me that your brain is making up this story now as opposed to remembering something that happened then. Then those are the indicators that you're not telling the truth.
Interesting. Have you ever encountered someone who's just an incredibly good liar?
Oh, yeah. Many, many people.
Really?
In fact, most of the people. I had a Nigerian fraud guy in Chicago. He's ripping off banks with a fake ID and counterfeit checks. And I catch him. I'm literally sitting there showing him photos of himself, like ripping off the banks under false identities and saying, and he's looking at pictures of himself saying, "As God is my witness, that is not me." Right? There was no psychological trick I was going to do to break this guy. He had just decided, to use the Shaggy defense. It wasn't me.
Was not him.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that defense didn't work for him.
No, he ended up going to prison and get sent back to Nigeria, and then he came back a couple of years later, but that's another story for another episode.
Did he behave when he came back?
No, he got caught in another fraud. And
you knew about him coming back.
I get a call from another agent like a decade later saying, "Do you remember Adedeji Okobanjo?" I go, "Yeah, I remember that guy." And they go, "He just came back. We arrested him in San Francisco for another fraud." I go, "Oh, well, tell him I said hi."
It sounds like he's probably not here anymore, though.
Yeah. The answer to your question, though, is yes, some people will lie to you with an absolute straight face. And so which is why it's important to gather the evidence and know the answers to the questions before you ask them.
Do you have any interrogations that you did that stuck out as like the most high stakes or like the most really important?
Okay, so I had a case 2019. Guy and his girlfriend go on from Topeka, Kansas, go on a Carnival cruise from Jacksonville, Florida to Freeport, Bahamas. First night of the cruise, she goes over the balcony in her cabin and falls to her death.
Oh.
Right. Before that happened, and so they have a morgue on the boats to put the dead bodies because a lot of old people die on boats anyway. Security interviewed him, the boyfriend who was in the room at the time. His story was that she was sitting on the railing of their balcony smoking weed, took a puff, leaned over, fell back to her death. None of that made a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. These balconies were not made. No one would sit on them in your right mind. It's just a really terrible place to sit. She had petechia in her eye, which is what happens when you get choked and blood vessels burst in your eye. Right. She also bounced off a lot of stuff on her way down. So the blunt force trauma, it could have explained that. It wasn't great evidence. The neighbors on either side had heard a knockdown, drag out, screaming fight before she went over the edge.
That's big.
No cameras. Very circumstantial case. By the time he made it back to Topeka, I went to go visit him a couple weeks later. I hopped on a plane, flew to Topeka, Kansas, sat down with him, and then after about an hour and a half of talking to him about the story, he confessed to me that he and she got into a fight that night. He grabbed her by her throat, choked her, threw her over the balcony to her death.
Wow.
And he's in prison right now for murder as a result of that.
I mean, good. Thank God.
Yeah.
When someone confesses in that scenario, does the confession help them in any way, or is it just really you getting the facts of the case?
Okay, so the federal system of criminal justice has a discount on your sentence for acceptance of responsibility. And it's up to the judge whether to give you that discount in your sentence. Oftentimes, the mere act of pleading guilty gives you that acceptance of responsibility. But the judge isn't required to give you credit for that. And so in theory, what the defense attorneys always say, when the defense attorneys wish their guy hadn't talked to me at all. Let's just establish
of course.
that, right? But they do, and I'm able to get confessions because I'm good at that. And so the defense attorney always as sentencing says, Judge, when Agent Simon went to visit my client, he didn't lie. He told the truth and confessed to throwing her off there. And then he pled guilty here. This man deserves his credit for acceptance of responsibility. He's clearly remorseful. He's sorry for what they do. So there's a benefit kind of baked into the system that you're giving the defense attorney a arrow in their quiver to argue that this guy is worthy of compassion from the judge. But that's the only real benefit.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that, like, you confess to a crime, you're getting half off or something, like it's Black Friday.
Again, it's very clear that, and I trained this, that the agent cannot make you a deal at all, right? I'm not. My job is not to. I can't make you a plea deal.
Yeah, you do not have the authority.
But what I do tell them is, listen, if I want you to tell the truth about what happened. And, and if you were, I'm going to take the information that you tell me and I'm going to bring it to the prosecutor, to the judge, and to anybody who needs to hear it to know that you're not a bad person. You just did a bad thing. So let's talk about the reason why you did this crime. And so, but I can't say you're going to get 10% off. We have an issue?
No.
Okay.
I heard the duct tape rip a little bit, but I think it's fine, honestly. Yeah. I think we're just going to let it fall at this point, right? I mean,
it's going to fall, but yeah, it's just saying a little bit.
That's okay.
Yeah, fuck it, dude. We'll see what happens.
Little snap, crackle, pop.